Yes, thank you, Margaret, and panelists, for your very interesting perspectives on the state of the payments industry. Before I say a few words about our next panel, I want to let those of you who are standing in the back of the room know that there are plenty of seats up front if you want to kind of move up front as we're transitioning. So we heard with Margaret's panel about the importance of a seamless omni-channel consumer experience. I think that's a great lead-in to our next panel, which is going to talk about the Internet of Things and how machine-to-machine communications can help make the payment become an event within the consumer experience, as we heard from our last panel. So I'd like to introduce Kurt Buechler. Kurt is Senior Vice President of Business Development and Channel Sales for Streetline, and he has been an agent of change via technology for 30 years. He must have started when he was 12. Kurt has worked with 9 startup companies and has had leadership roles with blue chip companies including Microsoft, IBM, and Xerox. He's passionate about bringing together large and diverse ecosystems to accelerate innovation. So please join me in welcoming Kurt Buechler. Thank you.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much, Cherie. Today we're here to talk about the changing world of industry, of payments, of consumers, homes. It's really going to be in summary, in one word, it's really change. So my history, as Sri sort of alluded to, was a history of change. And went backwards. There we go. My background really started in 1981 when I helped launch the IBM PC. Following that, in 1992, launched what we believe is the first graphical shopping mall, bringing the first e-commerce experiences to people like 800 Flowers and Tower Records and the Good Guys and things like that. So we've had a lot of opportunity to make changes for the positive. And at Microsoft, helped bring digital media forward, taking the whole internet of video out there. ZenSource changed in the late 90s, changed the way that data centers work. And I've really enjoyed the opportunity to just bring change forward. So today we're going to look at the Internet of Things. So first I want to define what that is, but there's a question that I want you to answer, if you will. How many of you, is it there, up there? Yes. Yes. How many of you are either wearing a Fitbit today, have a Fitbit, or have a fitness app on one of your smartphones? Good. Welcome. So a lot of people are raising their hands. That's great. Text that in, and we're going to see how many of you have joined the world of the Internet of Things. Now, what is this Internet of Things? Many of you may know, but there's many definitions. No one really agrees completely on this, but it's going to change the world of industry, how they work. It's the jet engines that have sensors on them that report maintenance. It's manufacturing that gives more information to decision makers so they can make smarter moves around inventory. It also changes the home in how we interact actively with our home, our heating, but also our ovens and things like that, but also passively. I notice what time you leave, so I'll set the security 10 minutes after that. I notice what time you wake up, so I'll automatically turn the heat on without you having to program that. But the whole idea is to give you a whole lot more information so you can make smarter decisions in your business life, your work life, your home life, and even your vehicles. These vehicles that you're going to be driving in the next 5 years are rolling computers, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So change is coming. And let's think about it. It's going to happen to people who expect it and those that don't. Nobody really thought that this would ever change. Blockbuster was a historically large company with huge barriers to entry against anybody else beating them. Yet the world changed. Netflix came along, didn't go in the front door, they went in the side door and said, we're going to come up with a better model, we're going to displace them. I don't know about you, but I love the T87. Always loved the T87 thermostat. Honeywell owned this business for 50 years. And all of a sudden, a connected device came along and changed the world. And Nest was there. And that's the first of many home automation things that are happening. So GM saw the world changing, saw electric vehicles as something that was important. and yet they couldn't even get out of the way of their own selves and make it happen with a 20-year advantage. And sure enough, Tesla came along. Not only when you have this kind of innovation, not only do you drive billions of dollars of value, but you grow new hair, as you see on the right-hand side. So if we look at autonomous vehicles, that's the big history, the thing that everyone's excited about. And certainly, it's going to be one of these brands, right? With all this experience, somebody's going to be doing the autonomous vehicle from this set. Oops, nope, once again, new approaches come along. So the thing that we know is change is coming. Change is absolutely coming. So here's our survey. Fantastic. Let's see. Look at that. That's fantastic. So a high engagement. If I see the numbers correctly, almost 50 people with a fitness app, and it looks like about 20 people with a Fitbit. So great sense of change. So now with that, let's get into let's see if our panelists are ready to come out, if they've been getting their microphones on. I'll read them off right here. We're not going to do big introductions. We want to get into the dialogue as quickly as possible. But Vish Sastry, Head of Product Strategy and for Visa Digital Solutions. Brett Paxton, EVP, Sales and Account Management for Park Mobile. Jeff Weiser, CEO of Paygo. Steve Latham, Principal at Banyan Hills Technology, and then Chris Thomas, Founder and Partner at Fontanella. So first of all, let's welcome the panelists. So let's get right into this. We're going to go through about 6 or 7 questions, and then we'll take the questions from you, the audience. And I'm going to hit it right off. And let's talk a little bit about what the IoT is, Internet of Things. We've talked about that, but let's first talk about what is the real value. Is there something worth fighting for here? So as we start to think about this large ecosystem, Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you for the first answer. Others can jump in. But where's the real value in this whole IoT? Who's going to impact on merchants, consumers, the industry? Tell us what you're thinking about from Fontanella's perspective. You're investing in an ecosystem of a changing world. So what are your thoughts?
I think ecosystem is exactly the right word. When you think about what IoT is, how are you actually getting real, complete connectivity, bringing together ecosystems that in the past had not been able to be brought together, had not been able to work together. And that's something for me and for us at Fontanella we're very excited by. By way of background, we're a fund that focuses uniquely on next generation mobility. So we look at companies in the mobility space that move people, goods, and services in urban centers around the globe. So we invest in companies, 14 to date, around the world, doing things like the world-leading parking payment company in the world, the world-leading transit and bus payment company in the world, non-traditional bike share, car share, GPS tracking for large fleets, looking at family safety and how all those things come together. So we look at this a little bit differently, but I think it speaks broadly to the opportunity that is IoT in terms of taking very disparate ecosystems and letting them connect. One example I like to use is a company of ours, Life360. This is the largest family network in the world. So you think about Facebook for social or LinkedIn for business. Life360 connects families. They just surpassed 50 million globally. And just recently had a very large investment from ADT, the largest home security company in North America, as part of a $50 million round that kind of brings together the smart family and the smart home. And when you think about how those ecosystems come together, providing a tremendous value to users and to consumers, obviously you can extrapolate from there, where those go in terms of data utilization, awareness of where your family members are, and just overall efficiencies in the system. But one other thing you mentioned, which I think is spot on, at least for us, is when you think about the vehicle. I recently heard, and I really loved it, I was at CES this year, which has become a glorified auto show, and somebody asked, what is the vehicle? And there's lots of answers in the crowd, and the moderator said, absolutely not, it's the largest wearable. That's what the vehicle now has become, which I thought was fantastic. And what we like to talk a lot about is v-commerce, and what does that mean? And so right now, when you leave your home every day and you go through a public tollway, you go to a parking lot, you go to a bridge that's facilitated by the city or through private tolls, all of those things right now using today's technology can be charged directly to that consumer, and that freeway, which is no way free, can also be charged for pure utilization, a pure matching of supply and demand and use. So those are things that we focus a lot on, and happy to dive deeper.
Yeah, others. So Steve, maybe you have some thoughts on how this world's changing, and where's the real value, and how does it evolve?
Sure. One of the trends that we've seen in the last decade has been really trying to understand more about the customer at the end of the transaction. So understanding preferences based on shopping behaviors, things of that nature. What I think the Internet of Things allows you to do is understand at the same level of detail the environment in which the transaction's occurring. So if you think about a retail transaction, you walk into a retailer and you're about to swipe your card, you could know, for example, how long has that person waited in line, what's the temperature in the environment that they're operating in, and then you can adjust the transaction relative to what's happening in the environment. And I think that's a true distinction between the way that we've traditionally thought about customizing or tailoring an experience to a particular customer and to leverage the environment and the data that's coming from the environment.
Okay. Any other quick comments? Okay.
I would just add to
Please.
that. I think it's really interesting to talk about what's happening at the point of transaction. I think what IoT, IoE, the Internet of Everything gives you the ability to do is to transact with a customer before they even know they want to transact. The ability to feed them information while they're en route to a certain, whether it be retail or otherwise environment, and know just based on their buying patterns and where they are at that point of their day that they will transact if given a push notification and there's an opportunity for them to actually to understand there's something that they want that they may not be aware of otherwise.
I'll give you a real-world example of harnessing the internet through Park Mobile. So I was going out to dinner last night. Of course, Park Mobile serves as a mobile payment platform for accepting parking payments. And I pull into a lot where you've probably all been there. There is an honor box or a coin box. And guess how much it cost? $4. You have to shove 4 individual bills into this little slot. So they're really trying to get you to pay them $5. But what I did instead was I drove about a block away where I could pay for it electronically through my mobile app on street, so that I'd have, that was the value that was to me, that I could actually go a little bit further away, but not have to be able to use a smartphone to pay and not be inconvenienced by not having cash, because I am one of those guys that does not carry cash anymore. So that is the value when you talk about value to a consumer, that there's real value there. We are all about trying to take the pain or the emotion, as I was going through last night, of do I try to just go for an hour and not pay or not? We take that emotion and pain out of a paying experience and give them a tool that a consumer, can use in order to make the right decision and pay for something that they should.
Wouldn't it have been great if that first parking space that you went to understood that you were leaving because of some sort of environmental condition, so that it could make a real-time adjustment to the price that you might pay to reserve that spot?
Yeah, it's interesting. What I'm hearing here is that there's times when you get information so you can make active decisions that are smarter. Who wants to give up Google search? Not me. I get a lot of information out of that. But now I'm going to get information from all these devices, and that's outstanding. But I'm also going to have passive opportunities. Pull into a parking space. It automatically starts the meter. Pull out of the parking space, automatically ends the meter, and I just drive away. That kind of a lifestyle is a real nice thing. So,
in a similar vein, Pago, our company, engages with consumers through the electric, natural gas, and water space. And so what we're leveraging is an environment in which the energy industry has a very difficult time building new generation. Conservation, sustainability is a huge issue. So what we're doing is enabling these utilities, by virtue of the new networks that they've built, to give customers the control positioning to be able to purchase and consume energy where, when, how they want. In a similar vein, we're bringing those tools to them. With respect to the merchants, obviously with prepayment, there's additional payments as you're topping up your accounts. There's an opportunity for merchants to participate in that ecosystem. And for the industry as a whole, we're enabling effectively consumers to manage and control their space.
Right. So let's go to question 2. Why don't we keep going with that, Jeff? As you start to think about people having more information or having decisions made for them, how do the roles, responsibilities change in this kind of world of Internet of Things?
Well, it's not unlike computing. Everything is getting distributed out to the edge in terms of calculations and activities. So in the utility space, consumers now have the ability to decide how they're going to consume this. And the good news is that when they do that, there's actually a conservation effect. There's literally savings because there's a behavioral change tied to that. And it's tied to the infrastructure that's out there that's providing the real-time information which companies like ourselves and others provide to make those decisions. So it's less command and control and more empowerment of the consumers that have that ability to now make those choices.
Vish, how do you feel about decisions for consumers being made by devices or parameters or other ways?
I think that key word of empowerment is really critical. It's something that we've uncovered in a lot of our own usability and consumer research as we've looked into Internet of Things and automation of payments. I think you're going to find a lot of instances where consumers will say, absolutely, I see a lot of value in this. I'm going to offload my choice of payment or my moment of commerce. Probably Uber being a very classic example, a lot of the ones that we've also talked about here being other examples as well. But at the same time, the consumer has to feel empowered. They have to really understand the data and the decisions that are coming in from all of these different devices and user experiences that they're interacting with. And I actually think that's where why you're seeing this explosion of the Internet of Things, the Internet of Everything right now, is because you finally got that device in the consumer's hands, and it's really the mobile phone. It's something that they can carry with them that has this really rich data interface, that has the ability to house a payment token or some other way for them to make that payment. And that really puts the empowerment back in their hands, as opposed to, say, feeling like your refrigerator is going to automatically order milk or eggs for you, even though, you know what, I intentionally ran my milk and my eggs down because I'm going out of town for the next 2 weeks. So it's really just finding that right balance of empowerment between what is possible with complete automation, complete data insight and analytics that are coming from the Internet of Things versus, I think, what the consumer wants, which is that ultimate empowerment and control.
Yeah. So Chris, parking is an example where you're invested, and people pushing their parking decisions out to automatically being paid. That's not a big deal. But as you start to think about this notion you mentioned, v-commerce, vehicle commerce, how do you think decisions are going to change? Maybe coming from the sidewalk into the vehicle, right? I think what I hear you saying. But how does this world change from the perspective of that?
I think tremendously, and it won't just be v-commerce or m-commerce. It's going to be a combination. It's going to be how do you transfer yourself as an individual, as a customer, into different environments in which you can transact as you see fit, when you see fit, regardless of where you are. And there's pure connectivity between all those assets. So one case study we like to use is the business traveler in an unknown or in an unfamiliar city, and that individual comes in, they pull out their mobile phone. They're able to sign up for a peer-to-peer car share service, which they're probably already a member of. They can actually pay for and grant access to that vehicle through their mobile device. They get in, they start driving to their meeting. In the in-dash component of their vehicle, they can actually find parking and reserve a parking spot while they're en route to where they're going. So they know that's exactly where they have to be. It's a seamless transition from mobile to vehicle as that syncs and as you go forward. While there, they get a notification in Dash that they're actually running late, that they're going to run late ETA-wise because there's been an accident. So now they have to have a differentiated plan. So real time, you can look at multi-modality assets, whether it's the mode is less important than the time you want to get there, pull off into a car park, jump on the train, be able to pay for that real time on your mobile device, transitioning from the vehicle, again, back to your handheld device. And when you get to where that train stop is, for that last mile portion of your trip, you can actually jump on a bike share and get to where you want to go. Yeah. Understanding ETA, understanding optimization, and understanding price. And your person, and this is a really important takeaway as well, everyone has personal utility. Are you cheap or are you lazy? Do you want to be as close as possible and pay, and you don't care how much it is, or do you want to pay as little as possible and you're happy to park in the boondocks? Those things will influence every aspect of how you transact and where you transact, and that's something that will be able to be optimized for every individual.
Yeah. So picture a world where you seamlessly have access to all these different transportation devices, as one example, and now I can make a real-time decision based on having the information and approach this world seamlessly. But that brings up a third question. Vish, I got to turn this over to you for starters. Nobody wants to get hurt. Nobody wants to really run into a world where they create problems for themselves. There's a lot of lack of information. There's also lack of comfort in some cases. But what are you doing at Visa around security? What are the considerations?
Yeah, I'll build up on the comments that I made in the last panel where I talked about those 4 key pieces. But I'll also say there are a couple of other things that we really need to think about as we bring commerce to the Internet of Things. I think one is just the underlying security of the devices themselves. Part of what we've seen in a lot of the most recent merchant breaches have been the fact that there's just this tremendous diversity of point of sale systems with their own unique vulnerabilities that unfortunately hackers have found ways to take advantage of. And one of the things that I think we look at and we consider is as the range of devices that are capable of conducting commerce just expands exponentially, the security requirements around those are also expand exponentially. And so we're really looking for ways to collaborate with the ecosystem on how to improve security amongst those devices. I think you've seen some of the things that we talked about in the previous panel, those 4 key pieces. We also work on certification programs like our Visa Ready program, where we today certify NFC devices to ensure that they're secure, capable of doing contactless transactions, and we'll look to expand that over time. I think one other thing that I would really think about in terms of security is just, when I'm a consumer, I'm used to the notion of electronic payments. I'm used to the notion that if my payment goes wrong, I can go back to my financial institution, tell them that this was an unauthorized payment, either it was a mistaken payment or hacker compromised my account, whatever the case may be, and count on my financial institution to make me whole. There's a really complex ecosystem sitting behind that, and it's really centered on the relationships between both the financial institution that works with the consumer, the financial institution that works with a merchant, or in this case, perhaps a device or a device manufacturer. And it's just really important to keep in mind that providing that consumer experience and giving them that peace of mind and security, that's a key driver. When we put in place Visa's zero liability policies, we did so for a big reason. We wanted to ensure that consumers felt safe conducting commerce across the board, but particularly for e-commerce. We want to make sure that that stays the case as payments move into the Internet of Things, and just having that underlying ecosystem really is critical to that.
Steve, you get a chance to look at a lot of different companies. What are your thoughts on security?
Yeah, security is absolutely probably the thing that comes up the most as you start to implement an IoT solution. I think that the concern being that you connect additional devices to a technology ecosystem and you're potentially introducing new points of vulnerability. You can have, it's a new place for someone that wants to do harm to your implementation to have access to your system and to get access to customer information or payment information that might need to otherwise be secure. The other thing that it does is you connect these devices, it gives people access, it could potentially give people access and the ability to throw load at systems that are critical for maintaining high transaction volume like we have here in Atlanta today. I think that the thing that we have to pay attention to is you take IoT solutions, sensors, beacons, things that are at the edge of the network, and you isolate them from the critical points of your transaction system. So we might take beacons, for example, isolate them so that they're capturing and reporting data that's useful to influence the transaction, but we don't necessarily integrate it in a way at the edge of the network that's causing potential areas of vulnerability.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
I would say in the electric industry, we have the challenge of physical infrastructure. If you think of distribution automation and sensors and activities in the field, all that information coming back in, and some of that information is salient to the transactions with consumers. And so marrying the requirements of the regulatory bodies, NIST and NERC and those types of folks, with physical infrastructure, with maintaining appropriate PCI and PII compliance for those transactions, and getting a utility an industry that's moving at a methodical pace, let me describe, to marry those two technologies together to make certain that all those risks are controlled is a challenge, but it's clearly the pivot point for this to be successful.
So let me do a lightning round. Just put no words, thumbs up or thumbs down. Is the risk higher or lower in the Internet of Things as you think about it? Just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you think the risk is going to be higher in the next couple of years or lower.
Depends on the company, right?
Okay, higher. Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, I'd say higher.
All right, moving on. So on that sort of vein, what steps do we need to take? We need to take some steps forward that will enable, but we also have to look at the defense, a little bit offensive defense. How are you guys thinking about what are the critical actions you got to do in the next year or two to really embrace the Internet of Things and how things are going to happen?
I think, one of the first things is you have to just get involved. I think that this is a space that has a lot of hype. If you look at the Gartner hype curve, it's at the inflated expectations. It's at the very peak. And I think as a result, you have many, many players. You have tons of progress happening virtually overnight. And so I think that the right thing to do is organize your organization, organize around IoT, build the right responsibilities, build the right partnerships with folks that are active in this space and that have experience in managing high transaction volume data coming in and then making decisions off of it. I think that the other thing that's important is we have to understand the value proposition both from the business and the customer. I think that what we're seeing is there's lots of things coming to market and dying quickly right now because people don't really get what is the true value that I'm trying to give to the customer. So I think that what we need to do is really pay attention to start with the problem, the end in mind first in this situation, and then bring in the right partnerships to enable the technology, heavy proof of concept, rapid prototypes, to really get at the right answer, the most meaningful answer for the customer.
You're thinking about right on the front lines, Brent. What are you guys doing?
So practical application of what Steve says here is, we've really focused at Park Mobile to stay on transportation, that space, rather than getting too broad. We're trying to go deep, not wide, with regard to focusing on merchants, parking merchants, who can acknowledge that our service is a value add, not only to the consumer, but also to their infrastructure. Because frankly, when we empower a consumer to be able to make a payment through their own device, that eliminates some of the expense associated with a merchant being able to install equipment to accept payments. So there is a value proposition to the merchants as well. But we've dedicated and focused all of our efforts on the parking environment. And now what we're doing is taking what we have traditionally been involved with was on-demand payments, real-time payments. When you park, you pay, and expand just a little bit into prepayments. So now not only can you pay with the app for parking when you're in your spot, but next week you're going to an event, you can prepay for that parking through the app. So again, just staying focused and dedicated on that particular sector that we've had success in. We've had over 3 million members that are using our service. We want to continue to gain their trust of what we're doing, but continue to provide them with mediums to do the same thing.
So Brent, at Park Mobile, you have a contained ecosystem. Vish, if we think about you're the polar opposite of that, right? Empowering merchants. How are you doing that?
Yeah, and I think we have to take the opposite view. You're absolutely right, where we've got to tackle breadth instead of depth, and I think we're doing that in a couple of different ways. Probably the biggest one in the short term is our big efforts around tokenization, and that's just, again, it's a pretty standard concept, but it's the notion of divorcing the underlying payment account from the actual payment token that resides on a particular device. And it's really critical because for consumers, they don't want to have to get a new prepaid card or a new payment account every time they get a new device or they start to engage in one of these new types of commerce. But at the same time, they need the convenience and security of knowing that, if my watch is lost or stolen, or if my phone is lost or stolen, or if one of these future devices like a car is lost or stolen, I don't want to have to sit there and have to wait for my plastic card to get replaced and wait that 7 to 10 business days. I don't want the insecurity of knowing that somebody might be out there using my device maliciously. And so the tokenization infrastructure that we've built gives us that flexibility to divorce those two so that if I do lose my phone, my plastic is still good. I can still continue to use that. And as we have this explosion of devices that are out there, it helps the consumer feel more secure about the fact that it's not their payment card sitting on that device. And if the device itself is gone, all of the other devices in their ecosystem can continue to work safely and soundly. So I think that's pretty critical. And then now for us, I think the battle is going to be, how do we help you guys get those tokens embedded inside of these payment experiences? And that, I think, is going to be something that we all evolve towards in the next several years.
Jeff, as you think about adoption, what's the key resistance point you get from your clients?
So the enabler for us primarily is information, or more appropriately, preventing disinformation. One of the misconceptions about prepayment is that it targets parts of the market, or it's not a broadly applicable solution. We know that wireless penetration is 32% in the United States for prepayment. And so there's a large city in the US actually just did a study, and 40% of the consumers that chose to prepay for their energy were not defined as low income. So disinformation. And then secondly, in an industry that's not out front on a lot of things, over time, actually starting to talk about their successes. So we have contracts with utilities that represent 15 million homes, if you will, in the United States. Think of that in terms of perhaps 45 million consumers over time. As they start to have success with these products, and these consumers actually vote not with their feet, but by procuring the solution, you'll start to see more. So that's a critical enabler for us. The obstacle, of course, is really twofold. One is the same regulatory challenges that we have on the payment side, we also have in the vertical that I represent. So there's a regulatory challenge, which is an education challenge, which we're actively engaged in. And then I think another thing is that just like with electronic wallets, I've had it for 5 years. I'm not an active user. I use it occasionally. And so a lot of new technology doesn't gain adoption. I think in the previous panel, they talked about once it reaches a critical mass of 5%. Similar type of thing applies in our space.
One quick aside with regard to the last three answers, which I love, is that they're completely focused on the customer. And I think for us, we're focused on that as well. And we would argue, which is maybe a little bit different than some of the people on the panel, that customers are completely agnostic when it comes to payment. What they care about is experience. Now, certainly there's affinity, and certainly there's security. But when you think about when you transact, how you transact, when you think about that Uber model, that Masabi model, that Park Mobile model, people are looking to transact on a trusted platform as quickly and conveniently as possible. They could care less how they pay. So it's an important, as we think about how this space evolves, what does that mean in terms of, is it pure affinity, is it pure security? How are these combinations and partnerships coming together? We're just seeing the consumer really going toward experience rather than their Delta, Reserve, Air American Express, and I love mine because of the points, but I could care less in some other ways.
I think that I challenge that a little bit. I think that might be true for certain segments of consumers, but I definitely think there are big segments of consumers that look at their payment card and have different relationships with it. And some of them are very much the reward aficionados, for lack of a better term. Sure. Some of them will look to say, I need to have the trust and security of a particular payment modality. So, again, not to toot our own horn, Visa zero liability, and others from what we've seen in our research really just like the convenience of just having all of their transactions in one place. So even if it's my, debit card or whatever the case may be, I just want to be able to see all of my transactions on one statement at the end of the month. So.
No, that's a really important point. I think differentiated service and affinity that come with the card, but when it comes just purely to that experience, I don't think, personally for me, I get zero utility in terms of being able to pay with a certain card when I make a physical purchase. What I get utility out of is speed and points. And so I think there's certainly different things that you can get more from, and maybe I'm very unique in this audience. But I think on the transaction side, those are the things we see customers coming back to again and again.
Great. All right, moving on. What's the next step? What specific actions are you taking at your companies? I'd like to hear some real world examples. Brent, again, you've got complete control of a sort of a closed ecosystem with your cities that you work with, the sometimes off-street parking.
Definitely.
You're starting to connect into autos, but then you're controlling this whole ecosystem within a vertical called parking. So tell us a bit more about what steps happen in the next year that you'll take.
No, absolutely. So what I was saying before, and I'm not sure if anybody heard me or not, but we are expanding a little bit of our payment opportunities into reservation payments, as well as parking or paying when you're in a parking space. So expanding the product base of our service, but equally as important, we think, is being able to expand the initiation methods. By that I mean the vehicle, connecting to the vehicle, to the wearables, to Google Glass or to a smart watch, in addition to, fine-tuning our app experience. We think all these different mediums that we've either introduced or have soon to be introduced in the future are going to be enablers for us to be able to expand our particular success that we've had thus far and continue to grow our footprint. Obviously, our goal is to have the service available throughout the country. So there are several different ways you can do that. You can expand within the industry, but also the mediums by which you offer the payment is a big contributing factor.
So it sounds like your goal is to take parking and push it into more of a passive relationship, saying, I just do it seamlessly. Right.
Ease of use, and knowing that parking is an interesting bird in the fact that it is a dynamically priced price point, meaning, if you're there for an hour, it's $1. If you're there 4 hours, it could be $6. So our app or our service actually is more than just a payment processor, but actually a tool, a calculator, if you will, to be able to provide you with the appropriate amount that should be paid.
Yeah. How about Jeff? What are your thoughts?
I would say, as a software provider and a merchant services provider, we're focused on really two things. We're focused on ubiquity of payments, and we're focused on accuracy. So one of the things that we've done recently is one of our key partners, AT&T, put out a release about a reference design for a module which can go in a meter, a sensor, et cetera, that furthers this process of real-time calculation. So in the energy space, we're not dealing with the same experience that I have when I use a card or my phone at a restaurant where I walk out and I know what my balance is. The data is behind me in the electric space. It's not real time. And so the more that we can do to make that experience an experience that's comparable to what a consumer finds in other verticals or other daily life experiences, the more satisfied that consumer is, the higher the SAT scores are for the utilities whom we partner with around the U.S. So that's a big thing for us emerging, and there's additional IP tied to that. And then secondly, there's a lot of work we're doing with respect to information, again, empowering consumers who then do the transactions and have better information to do it, surrounding understanding what does this week look like and what am I going to spend tomorrow, the next day, and the next day. And there's big data attributes that you can use to tie to what we call weatherize that data without sounding too wonkish, to give you a better view into what your experience is going to be with energy. So those are real-time experiences we have in IoT, working with in our ecosystem of partners to deliver that better customer experience to utility customers.
Yeah, and I think that experience of taking all of the data that's coming in from the Internet of Things and using that to create better consumer experiences, that's so critical. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about the actual consumer experience of, whether it's a Fitbit, which would normally, I think, when I first told my mother about this device, she said, it's kind of like a pedometer like I used to wear, and I go out walking, and I'm trying to tell her about how it's actually a connected device, and because it's connected, it helps me keep track of my goals over longer periods of time, helps me be more social about it. I think just taking that same set of extensions of data and analytics and bringing it into the commerce environment is also critical. You could do that in a lot of different ways. One of the ways that we're doing it is, for example, a product that we just launched, mobile location confirmation. We'll be able to help with the help of you and your issuer track where you are with your phone. And so if we see a fraudulent transaction come in that is nowhere near where you and your phone are, we're going to work with our financial institutions to say that's probably not Vish in Atlanta today. Or it actually is Vish in Atlanta today, even though he took the red eye over, even though he's going to be coming right back to San Francisco tomorrow. He's there today. His phone is there today. It's a trusted device. We know it's with him all the time. So we're going to take all of that information and feed it back into some big data analytics. And I think that's something that it feels like all of us are doing with the data that's coming in off of the Internet of Things.
Vish, so do you feel that consumers are willing to share their data, saying it's okay that you know where I am, what I'm doing?
I think some are going to be willing to share that, and I think that's going to.
Very interesting.
I think that's going to happen more and more as you start to see a greater sensitivity to security, which is something that we've started to see in some of our consumer data and trending information. And then I think, I hate to say this or hate to use this term, but I think there's just this consumer understanding that the more and more that I give up in the way of data that comes in off of my personal device, the more value I'm going to get in return. I think, again, it goes back to what I said about empowerment. If consumers feel empowered and they feel like I'm getting value for the data that I'm giving up in my location, then absolutely, I'm going to do it because But the last thing that I want is for my hard-earned money to go into a fraudster's pocket. And if providing my location to my trusted financial institution is a way to defray that risk, then yeah, I'm absolutely going to do that.
Yeah. Steve, any thoughts on what's the key thing you want to get done in the next year as an enabler?
Yeah, really, it goes back to a lot of what we're doing today is understanding. There's two things. One is we want to understand from the customer's perspective, but also the operators. So we were talking earlier about energy management systems, and you think about an operator that's operating a set of retail locations, and they've got energy management systems that are telling them the health of their HVAC. Then what we're hearing from them is that, yeah, that's great in isolation. It's very helpful to help operate and drive efficiency in our business. But what would be even more powerful is we could correlate that information to retail transactions that are happening at the point of sale. Yeah. Draw the correlation and say, when our HVAC is out or when it's experiencing pressure, is there a correlation so that they can become a better operator? And on the customer side, it's really about our conversations with the customers that we deal with are, we want to learn about your customer, and let's really test all of these IoT use cases that you have to make sure that at the end of the day, what we actually implement is maximizing the value. Mm-hmm. And the system part of this, the technology really has been around. The application of the technology and our ability to apply it appropriately is really the challenge.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, we just have one last question, the question of time. Everybody pull out your crystal ball and think about what will happen in what time frames. Chris, I'm going to start with you because you're thinking about across a number of companies that you've made investments in, and you're trying to drive change, right? So what are your thoughts on what are the inflection points of, is it 1 year, 1 month, 3 years, 10 years? What kind of change rate do you think we'll see?
Sure, no, we spent a lot of time thinking about this. And the example I gave earlier with the traveler in an unfamiliar city, that's not something that will happen in a year and 2 years and 3 years. That's something you can do today. Those are systemic transactions and engagements that you can do in different cities around the U.S. and around the world right now. So what does that mean in terms of what we're going to see? I mean, I think we focus on mobility broadly. To date, we've invested in road, rail, bike, and air cargo logistics. We look very closely at maritime logistics. We look closely at drones from an asset and a data utilization perspective. How are all these things going to come together, and what does that mean for the industry? I think the one thing that's most tangible for people in the room is when you think about your car, when is that going to become a truly transactionable device? There's been lots of 10-year plans. You always hear a 10-year plan from global OEMs, and next year it's a 10-year plan, and the next year it's a 10-year plan, and just kind of keeps pushing to the right. I think that we're seeing 10-year plans that are now reducing to 9 to 8 to 7 to 6. We're going to see some real transformations in how the vehicle itself integrates with IoT broadly, and the types of functionalities you'll have as a consumer in that vehicle and in any type of mode of transportation as you're thinking about optimized intermodal transactions and access in urban centers around the globe.
Jeff, you're also trying to drive change. You win by driving change. So how fast do you think this happens?
We win by driving customer satisfaction scores up for utilities,
right.
and that comes from consumer empowerment. So I think the tipping point, I talked about it before, is when we get to something like 5% with utilities. What comes with that, of course, when you down the road, if you get to the 30% level that we see in cellular, is a significant uplift in transactions, actually. Yeah. And so if you're paying 3 to 4 times a month. So I think the pressure, which is great because we're in the heart of the corridor that does this, is on creating products that create value for consumers, given the fact that transaction volume will change over time. And so that relates to fees, it relates to how you pay, where you pay. It means bringing across those folks who are still paying using that crazy product called cash that does exist, and in many cases, in certain pilots we've done, 50% of the people we've seen were using that horse and buggy. So both old and new have to be taken into the future, but I think it's a promising thing for this industry.
Just remember, cash is a 4-letter word.
I'm sorry?
Cash is a 4-letter word.
Well,
I've been accused of
Vish,
saying those words many times.
These guys all want to drive change. You're the guy that's got to shoulder some of the weight of security and all those risks. How fast do you think this world changes?
I have a horrible record at prognostication, so I'm probably not going to be the best person to answer this question because I've been one of those guys who's been trying to make mobile payments happen for probably the better part of 10 years. So to finally start to see a flywheel of success behind that is really encouraging. You know, I'll instead what I'll do is I'll just look back to the past on a couple of analogous examples and let the audience draw their own conclusions. And I'll say this, you know, what's happening with mobile payments, what's happening with person-to-person payments, also another industry that's just now really starting to hit its flywheel in a lot of ways, was predicated on, you know, a couple of key underlying enablers. One was just, again, a ubiquitous device that's with the consumer, that's universally connected, that has a really rich interface, and that's that mobile phone. So it's really, I think, important to think about as you expand to the Internet of Things, how easy is it for these devices to be connected to each other and to the consumer and that rich interaction device where they can feel empowered to make some of these changes. I think that's really a critical factor in figuring out exactly when these commerce experiences are really going to start to hit different kinds of tipping points. And I don't think it's going to be one example for one industry. I think it's just going to vary. I think parking is actually one place where we're really starting to see a lot of fantastic traction. And I think others are just going to take a little bit more time. And we just got to get the consumer experience right. We've got to get the connectivity right. We've got to get the consumer enablement right. And we've got to get the security right. I mean, the good news is, I think, with the security aspect of it, that's starting to get, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel there with some of the things that we and our partners in the industry are doing. I just think that getting some of these other pieces are going to be critical to getting to tipping points in different places in the Internet of Things.
So I'll give you my practical measuring stick. It's my daughter. She's 11, so when she joins the workforce, I expect that her world will be all about IoT. So that's 5 years till she's 16. Mm-hmm. And I really do believe
you work them young. Wow.
Hey, someone's got to pay my retirement, right? But no, I really do look at her as kind of that measuring stick of that generation joining the workforce, and they live and breathe off of a mobile device of some sort. Right now, that's not going to change. It's only going to increase.
I would say that as a technology provider, at Banyan, we are delivering IoT solutions. That's what we do. And I can honestly say that by the number of text messages that I received in the last 15 minutes, that it's happening. It is happening right now. The amount of interest and really proof of concept type of interest by large organizations to test out these ideas is happening every day. I think that there are some foundational things yet to be in place that are preventing the tipping point. You've got these sensors and devices that are deployed inside of an environment, and we're still standardizing how those sensors communicate over what network protocols. Right. There are decisions there that are being made, and they're happening quickly, but those are the building blocks that are necessary for these ideas to come to life. Right now, we're watching the dust start to kind of settle on a couple of standards, and as we see that happen over the next 1 to 3 years, that's really when I think we'll begin to see some of these ideas pop. But the interest and the appetite to spend and the budgets that are being created around this space is very real.
Very good. Okay, well, we've left some time open, so now we want to go to some of your questions. I don't know if we can open some mics up or how we can deliver this, but would definitely like to get questions. I am so lucky to have the opportunity to spend this great time with you folks, but also with this great panel of real experts. So I think we have a question here.
Good morning, gentlemen. Great conversation on the consumer experience and the Internet of Things and payments. My name is Kelly Goodwin. I work at SunTrust Bank, and like many of those people in the room and myself, we focus on business-to-business payments to serve our customers on a daily basis. So I'd like you to reflect on your thoughts and opinions of how the Internet of Things and payments will impact and is impacting the procure-to-pay process.
Vish, would you like to hit that one off?
You know, I am not. I would say I'm not familiar enough with the space to really have an accurate prognostication on it. I'd say, probably lots of potential impacts on being able to help businesses better manage resource utilization and perhaps by virtue of that impact their expenditures and payments. But I'm not the expert on the space, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else have thoughts?
I think you hit it. The thing that came to my mind was the operational nature of the business, is that some of the energy management, I keep coming back to that because it was referenced earlier, but you've got businesses that are looking at their environment saying, how do I further reduce cost in my existing footprint based on operational gains, and how does the Internet of Things help me there? And so if I'm going to draw any correlation to your question, I think that would be where I think that there's a high degree of interest in help me outfit my location in a way to where I can increase automation and reduce operational cost.
The question is what is this team doing, thinking about and addressing the 14 to 18s? So who'd like to tackle that one? Brent, I don't think people are parking much, so I don't know if that...
Right. I mean, I would say only in terms of when we really look at the experiences that we have today in terms of the app experience or our tablet experience or the vision of the connected vehicle is it's looking at, and I really do look to my daughter to some degree and her friends, is how do they engage with the tablet today? My son, plays Clash of Clans, and that's like a virtual social game. And how does that impact what we're doing in terms of what we're trying to accomplish with the Internet of Things, where everybody comes together in this virtual room and is playing games together? And I do think that we take that in consideration when we're contemplating new approaches to the app specifically, but it certainly transcends throughout all of the different mediums that we are building within our portfolio.
I think for us, some of our companies are very focused on, multi-age user groups. Some are very specific on more, a business age, so to speak. But one example I like to use is, I spoke a little bit about Life 360 earlier. This is the family network, family safety application. And one of our marketers put together a slide deck that showed angry tweets from age 12 to 16 about how the fact that their parents knew where they were as a result of the beacon coming from their phone, and the success of the product as a result of just how angry the tweets became. And so I think that I think we're all engaging in different ways. The one thing I would say is we're watching, as we've watched this evolve in the last 5 years, and certainly there's smarter minds than mine in the crowd focused directly on payments, is I think there's a very high desire to kind of talk about the other or talk about differentiated groups in a way in which they're very, very different than you and I. And I found so far, and this comes from a variety of experiences I had, that these young men and women, when they get to be in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s, will actually transact and act in a very similar manner when they get to those stages in their life. I think they're going to be very mobily focused. I think they're going to be very connected. I mean, that's going to be a differentiation from past generations. But I don't expect to see changes. And I always expect 11 to 16-year-olds to be upset about when their parents know where they are.
Yeah, one observation. So I'm with a company called Streetline, complementary to Park Mobile. We do smart parking. We don't think that a lot of 14 to 18-year-olds are parking, but we do watch the demographics of what is the population coming toward, and we definitely see a greater level of transparency and willingness to share data. To the comments we had earlier with Vish, what people fear in this room would be, I wouldn't want the pictures from my college parties posted. And boy, aren't those kids going to regret that. And it turns out they won't. They'll say, wow, I saw you vomiting in that, 30 years from now, they say, I saw that. And they go, let me show you mine. So there's kind of bragging rights, and there's just a much greater level of transparency. So that generation is definitely coming that's willing to share more information, more transparent about their strengths and weaknesses. I absolutely believe. And that will impact a lot of different businesses, and how they interact with those people, saying it's just going to be a much more transparent world.
I think it's important to understand, too, that part of the reason the Internet of Things is getting such the hype that it is because of that generation. There's factors like the cost of hardware, sensors coming down, and that technology becoming more accessible. But I think that the expectation from the younger generations is that information is available anytime, any place, simply by swiping your finger. And so I think that it absolutely is a consideration in all the decisions that we make around how to apply this technology effectively. We have to factor in that that's the expectation. That data has to be instantly accessible to them.
Yeah. The other observation that we do see as part of Streetline is the kids want experiences much more than things. I mean, I couldn't wait to open up the hood of the 240Z I had in 1978, that kind of thing, and show people, And they have no interest in things other than their phone, which generates experiences. So other thoughts, questions, answers on that?
Yeah, we don't see a lot of utility customers who are 12 and 14 years old, although that could be new.
But they drive the bill up.
But to your energy efficiency standpoint, as you get sensors in the home, as you have these tools, you are getting that information. But I will say that the psychographics that support our business tell us that, folks that are green or sustainability oriented, 60% interest in the product. Folks who are millennials, that age group, 60%. Seniors, 20%. So it's very logical to assume that that trend is also resident in that population. They want empowerment, they want control in their hand, and they want to pay for things when they can, how they can. Or have somebody else pay them for it. But anyway, I think it's consistent, that same sense.
So there's a complaint in the front about the cell phone bills of kids, and another cracked phone I'm sure has happened recently. But how does that? I'm just going to throw it out to you all and let you sort of run with this one. Where you want to go? Yeah.
Well, it is and it isn't. So again, I apologize for getting into one vertical, which is energy. But in my space, there used to be technology in the home that was physically a device that if you wanted to prepay for energy, that you would go to that device, which you, the consumer, would pay for in your utility bill, and you would go make your payments or you'd drive to some kiosk. And the Internet of Things, mobility, now has eliminated that device. So you're right that I look at that bill, which our kids are gone and it's gone down, so it's a good thing. But at the end of the day, there's so much more functionality that you're extracting from that device. The question isn't just what it's costing and what the connectivity is costing. What other things are you not potentially paying for? And I can just tell you that's one example where that cost is gone and that intelligence distributed to the edge is in a device that you can control. That would be my comment.
Yeah, I mean, from our standpoint, we put sensors down in parking spaces. Our first test was in Los Angeles. Put a parking sensor, a little hockey puck in every space in the downtown area. They pay us $20 a month for this service. Their revenue went up $90 per space per month. So that's Google level of margins, that kind of thing. So I think there is cost in many aspects of these technologies, but if you look at the ecosystem of a city, our best city saw their parking revenue go up 172% when they installed our solution because they could really optimize the pricing, and they also saw merchant revenue grow 12% in that downtown area. So more people coming downtown. So there absolutely is expense in these Internet of Things to put sensors on. But if you look at the cities, they are not managing land. That would be like Marriott not managing their space, their rooms, and saying, well, we don't know if there's room. We don't know what the right price is in Detroit versus Florida versus Hawaii, that sort of thing. So there's huge opportunities for additional revenue. And people like Rolls-Royce have said, you know what, the cost of these sensors is not cheap. To put 1,000 sensors on every motor is really expensive. But you know what's more expensive is plane maintenance, engine maintenance, failure, those sorts of things. So in the grand spectrum, I believe costs are going to plummet, and revenues there's new revenue opportunities as well that vastly exceed the costs, notwithstanding my daughter's cell bills.
And one last point, which I think both you guys hit on, is that in many cases, businesses and municipalities can't afford not to do this. Another, just a siloed example, we have a company that does fleet tracking and has Coca-Cola's fleet in North America. Huge savings from a fuel utilization perspective and making routes more efficient. But not only that, it's able to track where those drivers go, the speeds at which they're going there, and are they meeting mandate in terms of maximum hours on the road. So not only are you saving money and growing top and bottom line, but you're saving lives. And so these are solutions that actually are providing tremendous benefit across every metric you can think about within some of these enterprises.
Great. We might have time for one last question.
Got one here.
There we go. Please.
That last discussion kind of gets at my question. Most of your solutions seem to focus on consumer empowerment and can be contingent upon the consumer actually having a smartphone. I was wondering what sort of opportunities are available for reaching communities that maybe don't have smartphones, maybe are less privileged communities, or with regard to the payments, are maybe unbanked communities. How can these kinds of solutions help cities potentially provide services to those groups?
So again, being a service provider to utilities who have an obligation to serve and having a diverse population, when we deploy, we have to be able to reach everybody. So to your point, if there's a person who doesn't have a smartphone, we're launching, in concert with the utility, outbound IVR. They have some type of phone, outbound IVR phone calls. We're delivering other ways for them to pay because they don't necessarily have a smartphone, electronic wallet. So it's my reference before to cash solutions that still are very, very significant in many areas where these trends have not, reached kind of critical mass. So we have to, because of this, A, it's good business, and B, the obligation to serve, enable utilities who are reaching all these consumers, providing ways to get to them. And outbound IVR would be one way. Conventional text and email is not sufficient for those folks. You also have to provide places where they can walk in if they need to do that as well. So there's a whole series of things tied to that, and the transaction costs have to be reasonable.
And at Park Mobile, we complement what Jeff's saying. While we tout the app and utilization through some type of an internet-connected device, we also do offer other alternatives such as an IVR or landline use and retail networks. So we do accommodate all different types of parties, not just the Internet of Things app user.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, I want to thank this panel for their great contributions and thank all of you for your participation as well. And I'll turn it back over to Cherie, there you are. Thank you, everyone.